She never expected one quiet midnight to change the way she saw someone she had known for years. Yet that night, as rain tapped softly against the windows, she realized something was deeply wrong with Rowan, her husband's longtime friend. It began with a strange silence during a small gathering earlier that evening. Rowan usually carried a calm, easy presence, always polite, always gentle. But that night, he barely spoke. His eyes drifted away during conversations. His smile appeared only when someone looked directly at him, and even then, it felt borrowed, like it belonged to another moment entirely. She noticed. She always noticed things others missed. Her husband, Darius, didn't. He was busy laughing with another friend, retelling stories from their college days. But she kept glancing at Rowan, wondering why his shoulders looked heavier, why he kept rubbing his hands together as if trying to ground himself. Hours later, when everyone left and the house returned to its midnight stillness, she discovered Rowan had forgotten his jacket. She found it draped over the back of a chair, dark and soaked at the edges from the rain. She picked it up, intending to send him a simple message, but paused when she saw something tucked in the pocket. A small folded paper. She hesitated. She didn't want to pry, but the paper slipped out by accident, landing on the floor. When she bent to pick it up, she saw only one short line written in faint pencil. "I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending." Her breath caught. It wasn't dramatic or alarming. It simply felt heavy, honest, and painfully quiet. The kind of sentence someone writes when they don't know who to talk to. She knew she shouldn't assume anything, shouldn't jump to conclusions, but her heart tugged in a way she couldn't ignore. She kept imagining how he looked earlier, his quiet eyes and tired posture. Something inside her whispered that he was hurting far more than he let on. After a few minutes of pacing, she finally texted him. "You forgot your jacket. Do you want me to leave it outside for you, or should I drop it off tomorrow?" He replied after a long pause. "I can come get it now if it's not too late." It was already past midnight, but she typed back that it was fine. When he arrived, drenched again from the rain, he gave a small, fragile smile. She handed him the jacket carefully, her voice soft when she asked, "Are you all right?" He froze. Not the way someone freezes when surprised, but like a person who has been holding too much for too long, suddenly unsure if they're allowed to let anything slip. His gaze lowered. "I'm fine," he whispered, but his voice cracked on the last word. She had heard that sound before, from friends, from strangers, from herself on difficult nights. It was the sound of someone who was trying not to fall apart. Without thinking too hard, she stepped aside and said gently, "Do you want to come in for a moment?" "Just to sit. You look tired." He hesitated at the doorway, rain dripping from his hair onto the wooden threshold. She wondered if she had crossed a line, if she was stepping into something she shouldn't. But then Rowan sighed, long and shaky, and nodded. Inside, the house was dim, quiet, wrapped in the warm glow of a single lamp. She made tea, setting one cup in front of him, letting the steam fill the silence without pressing him. Finally, he said in a low voice, "I didn't want anyone to notice." Her heart tightened. He didn't look up when he continued, "But you did." For a moment, she felt a soft ache grow inside her, a mix of empathy, worry, and something she couldn't quite name. She knew this moment was only the beginning of something deeper, something unexpected. And she also knew she had to choose her words carefully, because whatever he was holding inside was delicate. Just as she leaned forward to speak, Rowan lifted his eyes, full of emotions he clearly didn't know how to express. And that was the moment everything quietly shifted between them. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Before she could ask him what he meant, Rowan whispered something that made her breath falter. "Can I tell you the real reason I'm not okay?" The room felt suddenly still, suspended on the edge of something fragile. Rowan didn't rush his words. He sat with his hands wrapped around the warm mug, staring at the steam as if it held the right answers for him. She stayed quiet, giving him space, sensing he needed to step carefully through whatever weighed on him so heavily. When he finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "I've been trying to hold everything together, and lately, I don't think I'm doing a very good job." She leaned slightly forward, not intruding, just showing she was listening. The rain outside softened into a steady hush, like the world was giving him permission to unravel a little. He rubbed his palms along the sides of the cup. "It's nothing dramatic, just life feels heavier than usual." He paused, swallowing. "Work has been overwhelming. My dad's health is slipping again. And I keep thinking I should be stronger than this, but I'm tired." The way he said tired, it wasn't about sleep. It was the kind of tired built from carrying too much alone. She felt her chest tighten with empathy. She knew the quiet exhaustion that comes from trying to look fine for everyone. She had lived through her own seasons like that. "You don't have to be strong every second," she said gently. "No one can do that." Rowan gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I know, but I'm used to being the one who holds things together, for everyone." She wondered how many people unknowingly leaned on him without realizing how much he was sacrificing to seem steady. Then she noticed the paper still sticking slightly out of his jacket pocket, the note, the confession he probably never meant anyone to read. He followed her gaze and stiffened. Carefully, he pulled out the folded page and held it in his hand. "You saw this, didn't you?" Her heart lurched. "It slipped out when I picked up your jacket. I didn't mean to read it." "It's okay," he murmured, looking down at the words he had written. "It's not a secret, just something I didn't expect anyone to notice." She hesitated, then asked, "What were you pretending?" He let out a breath that trembled at the edges. "That I'm okay with being alone in all this." The honesty of it made her eyes soften. She understood loneliness that hides behind polite smiles more than she liked to admit. Rowan finally looked at her, his expression open in a way she had never seen before. "You're the first person to ask how I'm doing in weeks." That stunned her a little. Darius didn't notice? "Darius is a good man," Rowan said quickly. "He just hasn't seen it. I don't blame him." He paused, lowering his gaze again. "But tonight, when you asked, I felt it. Someone actually saw me struggling." She felt warmth rise in her chest, not romantic, not misplaced, something gentler, like an instinct to protect someone who had carried too much alone. "You're not alone," she said softly. "Not tonight." Something fragile flickered in his expression. Gratitude, relief, maybe even surprise. As the minutes passed, the conversation deepened naturally. Rowan spoke about his father's declining health, how the doctors weren't giving clear answers. He mentioned his job piling new responsibilities on him each week without offering support. He admitted he hadn't slept well in months. And she listened, really listened. It struck her how few people in his life seemed to offer that simple act. At one point, he rubbed his forehead and whispered, "I didn't want to burden anyone." "You're not a burden," she said, her voice steady. "Caring about someone isn't a burden." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like a quiet bridge forming, unexpected, but real. Then Rowan's voice dropped. "I'm afraid I'll let people down if I show how much I'm struggling." She shook her head gently. Letting someone see your truth isn't letting them down, it's letting them in. His hands tightened around the mug, his breathing slowing, as if the weight had shifted just enough for him to finally sit still. After a while, he said, "Thank you for noticing and for caring." Her heart softened more deeply than she expected. But before she could respond, Rowan looked toward the doorway, his expression changing, as if he suddenly remembered something important, something that unsettled him. He turned back to her, quietly conflicted. "There's something else I haven't told you yet," he murmured, "and it might change how you see me." The room felt still, waiting for the truth he hadn't yet revealed. For a moment, Rowan didn't speak. His fingers pressed gently against the rim of the mug, and she could see the slight tremble in his hands. Whatever he needed to say next weighed differently, heavier, more personal, carrying a quiet fear beneath it. She kept her voice soft. "You can tell me. It's all right." He lifted his gaze slowly, his eyes reflecting the warm lamplight and something deeper beneath it. "I didn't come tonight only because of the jacket," he murmured. "I came because I didn't want to be alone anymore. Not tonight." Those words hit her in a tender place. Not in a romantic way, but in that human way that makes someone ache for another's loneliness. She sat back a little, giving him space, yet staying close enough to show she was there. "You're allowed to need company," she said gently. "There's nothing wrong with that." Rowan exhaled unsteadily. "I'm not used to admitting what I need." She nodded. "Most people aren't." He gave a faint, sad laugh. "Maybe that's the truth. Maybe I never learned how." The rain continued tapping softly against the windows, filling the moments of quiet between their words. She found herself studying him, how tired he looked, how carefully he tried to study himself, how grateful he seemed for even a small moment of warmth. Rowan took another breath, bracing himself. "There's something I've been carrying for months, something I thought I could manage on my own." His eyes lowered. "But I was wrong." Her heart tightened. "Is it about your father?" "Not only that," he hesitated. "It's something more personal." She didn't push. She let him move at his pace. When he finally spoke again, his voice was softer, steadier. "I've been feeling isolated, even around people." He paused. "I go to gatherings, I attend dinners, I smile, I talk when I need to, but I always feel like I'm on the outside of everything." She felt a small ache bloom in her chest. She had seen that look before in others, people who seemed surrounded but still felt alone. "Have you told anyone?" she asked. He shook his head. "People assume I'm fine because I don't complain." He looked down at the table. "Sometimes I wonder if anyone would even notice if I stopped showing up." "I would," she said instantly. He glanced up, startled by the certainty in her voice. She continued, her tone warm but steady. "You think your presence is quiet, unnoticed, easy to overlook, but it's not. You matter more than you think." A breath slipped out of him, a small, relieved sound, as if her words made something inside him ease. They sat in silence for a moment, letting the atmosphere calm. The room felt smaller, softer, like a quiet shelter for two people who needed a pause from the world. Then Rowan set the mug down and rubbed the back of his neck. "There's something else, too," he whispered. "Something I'm ashamed to admit." She leaned forward, gently encouraging. "It's okay. Go on." He hesitated again, but his voice eventually found its way. "Lately, I've been struggling with feeling like I don't belong anywhere. Not at work, not with my own family, sometimes not even with my friends." Her chest tightened. She understood that feeling far more deeply than she expected. "You belong here," she said quietly. "Right now, in this moment, you're not lost. You're not invisible. You're seen." The way he looked at her then, it wasn't romantic, not misplaced. It was the expression of someone who had been wandering in darkness and had finally found a small, steady light. He swallowed hard. "I don't know why it's easier telling you this than anyone else." "Maybe because you needed someone to listen," she replied, "and I'm here." Rowan nodded slowly, emotion flickering in his expression. It felt like the first time he allowed himself to fully breathe. But then something changed in the room. His gaze drifted toward the hallway, his brows tightening, as if he suddenly remembered the existence of the world outside this quiet moment. He clasped his hands together and said quietly, "There's one more truth, and it's the hardest part." The air shifted, thick with uncertainty. "What truth?" she asked softly. He looked at her, this time with hesitation strong enough to make her heart flutter with worry. "Darius isn't the only person who matters to me in this house," Rowan whispered. Her breath caught. An unexpected tension swept through the quiet room, delicate but undeniable. Her breath paused, not because his words crossed any boundary, but because of the emotion behind them. It wasn't romantic tension or something inappropriate. It was the deep vulnerability of someone afraid to lose the few people who anchored him. She steadied her voice. "What do you mean by that?" Rowan rubbed his palms together, trying to gather courage. "I don't just value Darius as a friend. I value you too, more than I realized until recently." She waited, listening without judgment, keeping her expression calm. He took a slow breath. "Every time I've come over, you've shown me kindness in small ways, asking how I'm doing, noticing when I'm quieter than usual, remembering things I mentioned weeks ago." His voice softened. "You make people feel safe." Her heart warmed, not in a way that threatened anything, but in the gentle ache of someone finally saying a truth they'd been holding too tightly. "I never meant for you to feel alone here," she said quietly. "I know," he whispered, "and maybe that's why I kept coming around more often. This house, the atmosphere, you, it all felt calm in a way I haven't felt anywhere else." She took that in slowly, letting the meaning settle. It wasn't a confession of love. It wasn't anything inappropriate. It was the voice of someone who had been silently craving stability and finding it in the smallest gestures. "Rowan," she said softly, "you're allowed to appreciate the people who make you feel supported. That isn't wrong." His shoulders lowered a little, the tension easing. "I just didn't want you to think I had bad intentions. I don't, not even a little." She smiled, a small, reassuring expression. "I never thought that." He nodded, eyes dropping again. "I was scared to say it aloud. I didn't want to lose the only place I still feel welcomed." That hit her deeply. "You won't lose us," she said firmly. "Not me, not Darius. You're not a burden to this house." His eyes lifted, shining with a fragile relief. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The rain had softened to a distant whisper, and the lamplight wrapped the room in a quiet, golden stillness. Then Rowan's voice broke the silence. "When things get overwhelming, sometimes I think about leaving this city, just disappearing for a while." The thought worried her, though he didn't say it in a dangerous way. It was the exhaustion speaking, the desire to escape pressure, not life. "Running isn't the answer," she said gently. "You'd carry the same weight wherever you go." He sighed. "I know, but it's tempting when you feel like you're failing everywhere." "You're not failing," she replied. "You're human, and you're hurting. That's not failure." He blinked, his jaw tightening. "No one's told me that before." A quiet ache wrapped around her chest. How many months, how many years had he walked through life without hearing the simplest reassurance? She shifted in her seat, her voice steady. "You said earlier that you're afraid of letting people down if you show how much you're struggling." He nodded wordlessly. "But you're not letting anyone down," she continued. "You're allowing someone to understand you. That takes courage." Rowan looked away for a moment, his throat working as he tried to steady his breathing. "It feels like I've been carrying all of this for so long that I forgot what it feels like to set anything down." Then maybe tonight is the start of that, she said softly. You don't have to carry everything alone. His hand drifted across the table slightly, as if instinctively seeking stability, but he caught himself and pulled back gently, not wanting to misstep. She noticed the gesture not as something romantic, but as someone reaching out for grounding without realizing it. After a quiet moment, Rowan spoke again, his voice low. Can I ask you something personal? She nodded carefully. Of course. He hesitated, choosing his words with care. Do you ever feel like you're giving so much support to others that you forget what you need yourself? The question surprised her more than she expected. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, realizing the truth of it tugged at her own heart in ways she rarely admitted. Yes, she whispered, more often than anyone realizes. Rowan's expression softened with understanding, a shared recognition, a silent link between two people who hid their struggles too well. Before she could say more, a faint sound echoed from down the hallway. Rowan tensed. She turned her head slowly, listening. It was the unmistakable creak of footsteps. Someone else was awake, and the moment between them, quiet, honest, fragile, hung suspended in the dim glow of the midnight room. She held her breath for a moment, listening to the soft creak echo from the hallway. Rowan straightened in his chair, his expression shifting from vulnerable to alert, as if reality had tapped him on the shoulder. But then the sound faded, followed by the distant hum of the heater turning on, and she realized it had only been the house settling in the cool night air, nothing more. Rowan let out a slow breath. For a second, I thought someone was awake. She offered a small smile. Old houses make old noises. But even as she said it, she felt how fragile the moment had become, how easily a single sound could pull both of them back to the surface after drifting into deeper waters. She folded her hands together, grounding herself before speaking again. Rowan, earlier, when you said this house feels like the only place you feel welcome, I don't want you to think that means you're dependent on us. You're stronger than you realize. He nodded gently, though something in his eyes flickered with doubt. Maybe. But it's been a long time since someone listened without rushing me. You deserve that, she said softly. Everyone does. The rain outside had almost stopped, leaving only the faint whisper of drops sliding down the window pane. The stillness wrapped around them again, quiet, warm, and full of unspoken truths. Rowan stared at the table for a moment, then whispered, You know, when you first opened the door tonight, I almost turned around. I didn't think I had the right to take up space in someone else's peace. Her heart ached. You don't need permission to be human. He looked up, emotion heavy in his expression. You make it sound so simple. It isn't simple, she admitted, but at least you're not walking through it alone tonight. Rowan's gaze softened in gratitude. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't asked if I was okay. She shook her head gently. You would have found your footing eventually. You're steadier than you think. He gave a faint smile. You have more faith in me than I do. Then borrow mine for a while, she said quietly, until yours comes back. For a moment, he closed his eyes, letting that sink in. When he opened them again, something had shifted. Still tired, still worn, but lighter, as if the weight had been shared rather than carried alone. A long silence passed, peaceful rather than tense. She felt it too, the sense that the night was slowly settling, offering a softer ending than either of them expected. You should get some rest, she finally murmured. It's late. Rowan looked toward the window, watching the last few raindrops slide down the glass. Yeah, I should. But he didn't stand yet. Instead, he looked at her with a quiet sincerity that made her chest warm. Thank you, he said. Not just for tonight, for seeing me when I didn't think anyone would. You're welcome, she replied softly. And remember, you don't have to hold everything by yourself, not anymore. He nodded slowly, the truth of her words settling into him like a steadying hand on the shoulder. After another moment, Rowan stood. She rose too, walking him to the door. The house was dim behind them, wrapped in the calm of the fading night. When she opened the door, the cool air brushed through, carrying the clean scent of the rain. Rowan stepped out, then paused on the threshold. "I'll try to show up for myself more," he said quietly, "starting tomorrow." "That's all anyone can ask," she replied. He offered a small, hopeful smile. "Good night." "Good night, Rowan." He walked down the steps slowly, not with the heaviness he carried earlier, but with something gentler, like he'd finally found a place to rest his heart for a while. She closed the door softly behind him, leaning against it for a moment as the quiet settled around her again. Not heavy this time, just peaceful. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring. But she knew something had shifted, not in a dramatic way, but in a human way. Two quiet souls recognizing each other's struggles and sharing a moment that mattered. And as she turned off the lamp and headed toward her room, she realized something important. Sometimes the most meaningful nights are the ones no one plans, moments born from rain, worry, and the courage to reach out first. And that midnight moment had changed more than just the atmosphere of her home. It had changed someone's heart, maybe even her own, in a quiet, gentle way she hadn't expected.